So we've gathered here today to have a questions and answer session, to have a discussion with Natalia Ciobanu, and she's doing some research. She's doing her doctorate at Boğaziçi University in Istanbul, and I'm pleased that we can have this questions and answer session with her. So the first question I'd just like to ask is, how real is climate change?
Maybe just to introduce a little bit the detail about my research, because the research I'm doing is more on climate change adaptation, exactly because climate change is very real and it's happening already, yeah. And the question at this point in time is, how do we adapt to what is coming up? Now, what is behind the question about is climate change real or not is most likely whether the human contribution to the climate change is real or not. Because scientifically speaking, climate change has been always there. Our climate on our planet has always been changing since the moment that we started having a climate. Yeah. So our planet is something like 4.5 billion years old, and life on Earth started to appear because the climate has been changing some 3 billion years ago, the first forms of life. Now, as human beings, we are just 100,000 years old, yeah, not more. In one form or another, we are a bit older, but let's say that in our modern shape and color, we are about 100,000 years old, not more. The climate that we are living in now, and actually the change of climate has allowed us as humans to appear and to develop and to thrive as we do today. What has been different before us was the climate had very hot and very warm periods. There were times when the climate was much hotter. It was during what we know as Jurassic, yeah? When we had dinosaurs and it was a flourishing, big trees and a lot of green plants and so on all around the planet and so on. It was actually exactly at that time that the fossil fuel deposits were formed. Yeah? It was because the climate was so hot that it allowed for the plants to grow and develop and then decay and then enter into this process of becoming fossil fuel, and then hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years later on to be what it is today, which is the gas and petrol deposits. But we as human beings have never witnessed such a climate. In our history, the climate has been much more mild and more friendly and more supportive of our development. And the problem today that we're facing is that it has been the climate has been changing towards getting warmer on an average. Warmer to an extent that we have not experienced not only in our human lives, but in our life as a human community, in our history as humans, yeah. And so this is absolutely real. The debate that is going on is whether or not we as humans have a contribution to it now. And the majority of evidence, I'd say that more than 90% of scientific community agrees that we have been contributing to increasing the speed of climate change. So there is a natural speed at which the climate is changing and the temperature is rising on an average. But then because of our industrial development and because of burning fossil fuels, mainly because burning fossil fuels, we have been contributing to increasing the rate of change. And there are some skeptics, and they have their arguments, but all in all, the general community and the general agreement that not only that the climate change is real, there is also a definite human contribution to how quickly it is changing.
Could you say a bit about how the climate has been changing and some of the effects of climate change happening now?
Well, in average, one can say that the biggest threat, let's say, to the overall climate is what we know as the global warming. Yeah. And this is even more contested than the climate change, yeah, whether or not it's warming, and primarily because in some places people observe a cooling rather than a warming. Now here we need to be very specific, and we need to understand that this global warming is meant as a global average in an increase of temperature. So it might be that somewhere in some places, in some regions, the average temperature per year is getting smaller, but in some other places the average temperature is getting much higher. So when we add these two and we divide it, then we get an average, and this average is what is increasing. It doesn't mean that the temperature is increasing everywhere on Earth at the same speed and with the same degree. In some places it's more, in some places it's less, and in some places, as I was mentioning, it's getting a bit colder. But the average is increasing. How we feel it locally is the effect, yeah, is that we are noticing changes in weather patterns. What it means is that we're probably noticing that winters are getting warmer in some places. In some other places we're noticing that the level of seawater is getting higher, it's rising. Yeah? In other places we notice, usually in those regions where we have autumns and springs usually, we notice that these transition seasons are getting shorter. So we're getting faster from winter to summer, or from summer to winter. We have these sudden changes. Yeah? And especially people who are in the agricultural sector might be much more aware of the changes in rainfall patterns. The rain is not as usual, so it can be more rare and more intense. We can have more storms, for example, which don't help agriculture at all. And the intensity, and it has been recorded also, that the intensity and frequency of hurricanes across the globe and of storms across the globe is increasing. That's one, the direct effect. Now, how do we feel it? We usually feel it in terms of, as I was mentioning, the agricultural productivity. That means the food that is being grown, how much food we get. We also feel it in terms of the impacts on our health even. No? Another consequence of these changes in climate is that we have more frequent periods of, or let's say, heat waves and cold waves. Especially in cities. People in cities usually feel it much more stronger, the hot periods. And the primary group, vulnerable group, is children and older people and people who suffer already from some heart-related or tension-related diseases. Yeah. High pressure, blood pressure. So this can be felt already. In cities, people tend to feel it less because we usually have much more comfortable conditions. If it's hot outside, we have air conditioning. If it's cold outside, we have the inner heating. If you're thirsty, we go and open the tap and we have water. We often don't feel it so directly. But people who are living in more remote areas or in villages or in closer to the nature are people who feel it much stronger and more obvious. Overall, globally speaking, what the scientists predict as consequences is the rise in the sea levels, which will determine, I mean, having in mind that more than 50% of people are living in coastal areas on the side of big rivers or seas and oceans. An increase with 50 centimeters or 1 meter would leave a lot of these people without a home. So cities like New York or even Istanbul or Tokyo and so on, they would be flooded, with the rise of the sea level. And the level of sea rises primarily because of increase in temperature in Arctic areas, where we have the Arctic sheets melting. It's already common knowledge, it's everywhere in the news as well, that it's likely we are not going to have any more ice caps in the north. And of course, once that water gets into, once the ice gets melted and gets into the water, it contributes to the rise in the overall level. And also, by getting warmer, the water also expands, so we have the rise in sea level. Yeah, one can think about it like that as well.
You're keen to make the connections between the sex drive and global warming, climate change. Can you please explain the connections between those two things, the sex drive on the one hand and climate change on the other?
The very uncomfortable question. It's very uncomfortable, and at the first point or at the first look, it's quite difficult to make it even, no? But if you look a bit carefully, it's not that difficult actually to make it. So let's think a bit in the reverse. Let's not think from the sex drive, let's think from the side of the climate change. So why is the climate changing? Or why is the global temperature rising? It is because we have the greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere accumulating and retaining the heat, which contributes to the increase and so on in climate change. So we know that it's because the CO2, the carbon dioxide, the methane, the water vapor, the oxygen nitrates, and these compounds, the greenhouse gases, they are in the atmosphere. How do they get there? It's because we're usually using planes, we're burning fossil fuels, right? We're producing loads and loads of meat, and all these activities and this whole bunch of transportation that is going on, this whole activity emits or contributes to the emissions of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And then of course comes the question, but why are we doing it all? Why do we need so much transportation? Why do we need so much production? Why do we need so much industry? Well, on the one hand, and the most straightforward, is because of course we need food. And in some cases, some of us don't have direct access to food in the places where we live. If you live in the cities, not all of us has a garden, and if you have a garden, maybe it's not enough to feed ourselves. Therefore, we go and we buy food that has been brought from someplace else. In this process of transportation, there has been fossil fuel burned, right? And the gases have been emitted into the atmosphere and so on. But besides food and besides the water, what are the other reasons why we consume? No? We want a new piece of clothes, no? We want a new t-shirt, we want a new miniskirt, or maybe we want a car, or maybe, I don't know, what else can you want? We want some makeup, usually, or maybe we want to, some products that make us look more stronger, more fit, or we want some products that make us look more attractive as women, and so on. I mean, isn't this the reason why we go and buy clothes? If the only reason was that we are cold, then it wouldn't really matter what we're getting ourselves, But it's not just because we're cold that we're buying clothes, but We don't buy any kind of clothes. We need to like it. And when we like it, we put it on ourselves and we look into the mirror. Does it look good on me or not? But what does it mean to look good on me? No? It means straightforward. Am I sexy enough? Is this cloth sexy enough for me to wear? Or when, as a man, if I go to buy a car, I don't buy just any car. No? Why do I buy one car and not the other car? I look better in it. Better for whom? For me? I mean, if it's just for me, I sit in it, I take a picture for me, and I know that I sit in it. It's usually not for me that I'm buying the car, no? I mean, sometimes we buy it because we need it to go to do our business. But again, if it's just for business, then it doesn't really matter. What matters more is how are we perceived. No? That's usually why we care so much about the color of the car, about how the car looks on us, or we look in the car. And then, even if we drive for 10 kilometers per day, it's still nicer to drive in a Ferrari than in a Dacia Logan on the streets, you know. No advertisements intended. But the whole idea is that we think that we look sexier and more attractive to those around us if we use one cloth, or if then another, or if we buy one car then another. And usually we tend to think that we look sexier if we have two cars than one car, you know, or three cars. You know, if as a man I go in, you know, in a club and I talk with a girl and I told her I have 3 Ferraris in my garage. So would you like to come by and stop and see how, the colors and so on? We tend to think that we are going to get the girl actually coming to our home, no? Or as a woman, you know, if I go to meet a friend or I go to a club, I cannot go in the same dress every day to the club. It will not draw the attention. But if one day I go dressed in one way, another day I go dressed in another way, the third day in another way, and so on. So every day different clothes, diversity, you know. Then we think that the man will look at, she looks nice. This dress makes her look really nice. This dress kind of, she has quite good proportions, you know. So we buy more clothes because we want to show diversity, because we want to put our, you know, physical appearance in.
So you're saying that our sex drive leads to an increase in consumption, which in turn leads to waste, which in turn leads to a rise in, you know, global warming and climate change. That would be the correlation.
That would be it, yeah. And if we think that to produce one t-shirt, let's think about the production process. It's not just the fossil fuel that has been burned to bring the t-shirt from a deposit or from production site to the shop. It's also the fossil fuel and the emissions that have been produced when the cotton, assuming that the t-shirt is made from cotton, the cotton was being grown. So we had fossil fuel being burnt by the machines who were planting the seeds, then the machines who were getting the people to go there to work, to collect the cotton, right? Then all the cotton being transported from the farm to the processing plant, then from the processing plant to the textile factory. And in the textile factory, of course, again, you have machines that work on electricity. And in most of the, especially developing countries, the electricity is produced from fossil fuel burning. So if you look at the whole life cycle of a t-shirt, then it's no wonder that to produce one t-shirt, the emissions are 15 to 30 kilograms.
We're talking about the carbon footprint, right?
Yeah, the carbon footprint of a product, yes.
Do you think people are aware of this? The carbon footprint of things they use?
Well, some are for sure, many are not.
Do you think enough? Not enough. Or maybe enough are aware of this?
of the existence of
the
carbon?
existence of the carbon footprint.
I think if we have the courage to ask ourselves the question, then we will have to admit that yes, everything we are using in our everyday life has a carbon footprint, because there has been, at one point or another in the production cycle of that good, there has been fossil fuel burned in order to produce that good. Or in case of our food choices, if we eat meat, for sure there has been methane emitted in the atmosphere somewhere in the cycle of the processing or producing.
Mm-hmm.
In many poor countries, very poor countries, they could be a family of 8 or 10 or 12 people, but because they're so poor, they produce very, very low levels of carbon dioxide. Does your argument mainly apply to those in the developing and the rich countries, or would you still hold out your argument for all human beings in the whole world?
For sure, all human beings have a certain carbon footprint attached to the lifestyle. But it is also very true that richer people, that is, people living in the richer countries, have a bigger impact, have a bigger carbon footprint than those in smaller countries, or poorer countries, let's say. There have been some statistics done, and the conclusion was that if everybody was to consume as the people in the United States do, or in Europe do, we would need 3 more planets. 1 planet would not be enough to produce all the goods and all the services that we consume. Yeah? Whereas the carbon footprint, or the number of planets that somebody, if we were to live as somebody in India, for example, or in Bangladesh, we would need half of the planet that we have now. Yeah? Consumption patterns are very different. Now, of course, we know that the situation of people in India and in Bangladesh, the majority of them, is not very good. There are very many poor people, and many of them living in conditions that are not healthy at all, not having access to electricity, to basic health care, to healthy food, safe drinking water, and so on. These are also things that in order for us to have access to them, we need to have no exactly too much alternatives than to produce certain carbon footprint. So some emissions, some greenhouse emissions. But then how do we keep the balance? That's the whole question. No? Where is enough? Where is really the level where we cover our basic needs, and as a human to survive, or as a community, to survive, to develop in decent conditions, and where does actually something more than just the need comes to play, such as the greed. And as we were mentioning before, it is this question whether I'm sexy enough, whether I'm attractive enough, whether I'm accepted as I would like to by those around me, that gives rise to this greed. No, I want more, I want more, I want more. And then we start to not see very clearly the line between what we need and what we want.
What do you think would help us to see that line more clearly? What would help us to distinguish between genuine needs and what you've called greed?
It's a very good question, and it is very, very personal to each of us. But the key word here, I would say, would be the mindfulness and awareness. Mindfulness of our own inner processes, first of all, our need. If I need 300 or 400 grams of food for one meal? Why would I order 3 different dishes that overall they weight or they add up to 1 kilogram? I know that I cannot eat 1 kilogram, but I know that I can eat maximum 500 grams. So that automatically means that when I'm ordering 1 kilogram of food, just because I want to see a diversity, I want to see much food in front of me, I will throw away half of it. And that is actually what also the statistics say. In Europe and in America, we are throwing 50% of the food that is being produced without even eating it. And food is one of the industries or one of the sectors that contributes hugely to greenhouse gas emissions. So being mindful of how much I actually need, and when I'm ordering something or when I'm buying something, I'm looking at, okay, am I really going to eat it all, or am I just from the start throwing 50% of what I'm buying directly to the waste? That's one way. And when I speak about awareness, the second important factor is looking at and thinking about what did it take for this specific product to be in my hands, or for this specific service to be here. What is the story behind that product or that story, or that service? And to learn that, to know that, we need to document ourselves. We need to search on Google. It's the easiest, no? If not, go and talk to the people and ask those who know about it. And today, I mean, in 2016, internet is one of the most accessible tools to the majority of those who consume a big part. And 20% of the people in the world, 20% of the richest people, consume 80% of its resources. No? So if we have access to 80% of the resources, we surely have access to internet, where we can find the story behind the products and the services that we are consuming. And looking at this story and documenting and knowing what are the impacts, we can take a break and think about, how can I reduce it? Can I reduce it by not consuming this product? Or if it's a really important product, like let's say food, do I have an alternative which produces less greenhouse gases? I'll give you a very concrete example. So I've been living in Romania for a long time, and I go to the supermarket and I want to buy garlic because I love garlic and it's healthy and everything. And garlic also grows very easily and widely in Romania. But guess what? In the supermarket, I see garlic imported from China. Nothing Romanian, So, if I want garlic, I can easily buy it from the supermarket, and it was produced in China and it traveled all that way. Or I can just go to the market where there is a lady or a man, a farmer, selling it from his own garden, or maybe just products that are being produced in Romania, and then I reduce a lot the CO2 footprint because I'm buying something local. That's another way.
But what do we do with the garlic that came from China? Because it's still there in a supermarket in Romania.
Well, we are living in a world, or at least in a region, that is kind of dominated by the free market economy. And the main driver of free market economy is the demand. If there is no demand, there is no supply. So if I'm not going to buy the garlic from China, if I'm going to create the demand for garlic from Romania, and you are going to do the same, and Vajracaksu is going to do the same, and then somebody else is going to do the same, then what happens is that garlic left in the supermarket is going to get spoiled.
Poor garlic.
And so we are cutting on the demand for that garlic, and the market managers will probably not import that anymore because it's not being demanded by the consumer. But instead, they might look at, okay, but what is the consumer demanding? Because their interest is to make money. How do they make money? By looking at what does the consumer want. Who is the consumer? Me and you and you and you. So we are creating the demand, and the market, the suppliers, are giving us what we ask. This is not going to change overnight. We're not living in a Hollywood movie. We need to be aware of that. It's going to take time, but not only time, it needs also constant effort from our side. Constantly making this decision, constantly making and creating demand for something that is more environmentally friendly, less contributing to the greenhouse gas emissions.
I know you're keen to promote responsible consumption. Can you say a bit more about what that could look like in practice? Responsible consumption.
Related to the sexual drive, maybe.
Yeah, well, responsible consumption is, let's say, a more personal alternative to the word sustainable consumption. Sustainable consumption is probably more widely used, but it's also more widely misunderstood because it can be interpreted in two different ways. Sustainable consumption can be interpreted either correctly or incorrectly. So the correct way is that we consume in such a way that we allow for the future generations to satisfy their own needs. So we consume in a sustainable way. The way that many other people are interpreting and misusing this sustainable consumption is that we consume in such a way that we can keep on consuming, just sustain the consumption. Not consume sustainably, but sustain the consumption. That's the wrong way of looking at this. So to avoid this misunderstanding, we choose to use the term responsible consumption. And by responsible consumption, we mean consuming with care for people and love towards nature, or love for people and respect towards nature, care for nature. Yeah? Meaning that before making a choice, what to buy, what to consume, we need to think carefully about what is the impact of this product or this service on the environment. What did it take for this product to come into being here? Is it a local one, or does it come from far away? If it comes from far away, probably its environmental impact will be bigger because there was the greenhouse emission involved, yeah? Or at the same time, while growing it, has it been grown ecologically, so clean, or have there been chemicals used in the production process? Obviously, if there are more chemicals, it's very likely it's not so environmental friendly, So thinking about the environmental impact, it's one aspect of responsible consumption. The second one is, what is the impact on the community? Firstly, on the community where it was produced. And again, if the community where the product was produced is far away, it is very likely that we don't know what is the impact on the community. Is it helping or is it damaging? If we buy a cheap product in Europe that has been produced even cheaper somewhere in Asian countries or in African countries, how could it possibly be produced without a negative impact on those people if it's so cheap here, right? It's quite common sense. So looking for cheap products we need to keep this in mind. While if it has been produced locally, it is much easier to know what is the story behind it. Is this product really helping the community or is it damaging the community? Yeah. So knowing that can help us make an informed decision whether to buy this product or not. And then, of course, speaking about climate change, looking at what is the footprint of this product. Nowadays, again, on the internet, one can find really many resources, and there has been a lot of research done on the CO2 or greenhouse gas footprint of a product or a service. So having this smartphone, also on the internet, it's quite easy to go and say, okay, well, so what is the CO2 emission of a t-shirt, for example? Now, I don't advocate at all saying, okay, I give up everything, I go into a cave somewhere in the mountains and I live naked and so on and so forth. Yeah? But once we know what is our footprint, CO2 footprint, we can then assume the responsibility of setting off? Offsetting the footprint, which means that if I know that I have produced this year 30 tons of CO2, I don't know, for example, then I think, okay, what can I do to offset this? So perhaps I need to plant 30 trees, or perhaps I need to go and prevent the deforestation of 2 hectares of forest. So increase the forested areas, stop the deforestation of existing forested areas, increase the green spaces, probably engage in greening the urban areas and so on. So looking at what I can do in order to increase the capacity of the environment to deal with the pollution, to deal with the climate change, to increase we call it the sequestration capacity, which is the capacity of the earth to take the greenhouse gases from the atmosphere and absorb it. Yeah.
Are there you've talked about the principles of responsible consumption. Are there any particular things you would like to draw our attention to? Are there any particularly harmful forms of consumption that we need to be extra mindful of?
Surely, I think we somehow instinctively, each of us knows it. Yeah, each of us knows that an ecological product that has been grown without chemicals is healthier than one for which chemicals were used. Yeah. We instinctively know that a product that has been produced at the cost of health of another human being or another living beings is less ethical than a product that has been produced with consideration for the health and safety of the employees. So in the products that we are buying usually, especially the food products or the makeup products and so on, we need to look at the labels. Yeah, it's usually quite well described what this product contains, and this can help us in making an informed decision whether we want to buy this product or we want to consume it or not. Yeah, general as a rule of thumb is that if there is some chemical that it looks very strange to us, it's probably something harmful. It's not very good. You know, there was this thing of labeling the carcinogenic or in any form damaging chemicals or with a potential threat for our health, to label them as E201 or E500 something. Yeah? Now that was quite a good safeguarding measure, but then what the industries did is that they have replaced this E with the actually scientific name of it, yeah, which probably none of us knows, except for the fact that those who probably studied chemical engineering or have been involved in the producing of that product. But other than that, none of us knows what those mean. But if they look unfamiliar, they're probably not very safe. So avoiding and trying to buy as much natural product as possible is one way. And another way would be, of course, today having in mind all these diseases and all the threats to the health of not only human beings but also animals, and also having in mind that the growing demand of meat, for example, is beyond the capacity of farmers to produce. We now have industrial farms now where animals are being grown in totally inhumane or unimaginably awful conditions, yeah. And moreover, in order to feed it and to make the meat grow faster so it can end up faster on our plates, there have been a lot of, you know, antibiotics and all these chemical products used to facilitate the production of meat. And we need to keep that in mind when we decide to buy or not to buy meat, to eat or not to eat meat. I mean, cutting off on or cutting down on the amount of meat that we consume can also be another very effective measure, not only to contribute to mitigation of climate change, but also on considering the impact on our health and on the well-being of the other animals and of the overall environment, and other people, of course.
Thank you. Have you got any information to share about positive developments in relation to responding to or combating climate change nationally or internationally?
Well, internationally, I think one of the most famous and most recent developments is the COP21, the signing of the agreement on combating climate change and reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. And recently, we also heard in the news that China and USA and India, so the big
Offenders, let's say.
Yeah, big industrial countries, they have become more inclined to commit to reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, which is a huge step, and this is something that I think we need to rejoice on, but also follow up on. Yeah, that's a big thing, because the big countries make the big policies, and we know that many of the products that we're consuming today, they come from China. It's no secret anymore. So it is a big step. But other than that, there are beautiful things that happen also at national and even at local levels. So we were talking about offsetting, yeah. We're talking about how can we contribute to neutralizing the amount of greenhouse gases that we are producing, or our footprint, yeah. And I know of a company, at least one company, the Atmosphere. It's a company that receives the money that we are willing to pay to offset our footprint from flying the planes. Yeah? So what happens is that they are calculating the amount, and usually today most of the airlines inform you on the amount of carbon produced for you to fly from one place to another. Yeah? But you can also use the carbon calculators for that. And what this company does is that it offers you the possibility to pay the amount of money to offset it. They take this money and then they use it money to plant trees somewhere in the world where it's needed, or to help some communities that need more attention in climate change adaptation, and in this way somehow trying to neutralize, or helping you neutralize, the impact that you're having. There are also, even in Turkey, there is Çekül, I guess, who is doing the same thing. So there are these small local NGOs or national NGOs, the bigger ones. In Turkey it's Çekül, but then we also have these international initiatives called Seed It Forward. It's an initiative implemented in different countries, but by different NGOs. I know in Moldova it's Ecovizio, but there is also in Romania, I don't remember who. Anyway, it's an international initiative, and again, one can easily see it on internet. That plants trees. That's the only thing they do. They plant trees, and they follow up on the trees to grow, because it's not enough just to plant it. If the tree is fresh, is new, and then it's a dry period, as it happens because of climate change, then it needs watering from time to time. So what these people do is that they're actually taking the money, buying the trees, planting the trees, and then making sure that these seeds or this pidan
Sapling.
sapling, yeah, saplings. These saplings actually become trees at a certain point in time. So sure, but in this sense, I would even encourage to look at what are the initiatives around us, our places where we live, to try to connect with them. And if we don't have the time to plant the trees and follow up on it ourselves, perhaps supporting such organizations and such initiatives can be a good way forward. And then there are also small initiatives, like small communities who try to switch from this industrial agriculture to more local agriculture, and who are trying to develop local products and self-sustaining little gardens and permaculture products, and permaculture projects, sorry. And they're looking at what kind of plants can grow together with what kind of other plants in the new climatic conditions, and so on and so forth. So they're actually small initiatives who are showing whether and how it is possible to live on a smaller scale, to be more aware of what is actually the need of a certain community in terms of food, and to try to produce, to be self-sufficient in terms of food, and in this way to reduce a lot the impact of using food from thousands and thousands of kilometers of distance. No, I mean there are quite a lot of them, but there surely are. Yeah, there surely are. And luckily today we also have YouTube, where I think we're going to put also this recording, but also where one can find many examples of initiatives happening on a local level that can inspire.
Good. Yeah. Thank you very much, Natalia. That was informative and at times inspiring to listen to. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me here.